Imagine looking at the Berlin Wall not from a map, but from the ground. Concrete, barbed wire, a strip of raked sand that East German authorities proudly called the death zone. And above it all, strung between tall poles, a tangle of cables that carried power and communications across the divided city. To the men who designed this border, those cables were just infrastructure. To one man in December 1962, they became something else entirely. They became a tightrope. His name was Horst Klein. He was a trapeze artist, a man whose whole life had been about balance, timing, and turning gravity into a suggestion instead of a law. The East German state saw him as a problem. He had the wrong opinions. He did not fit. So they did what authoritarian systems do when someone does not fit. They tried to take away his stage. They banned him from performing. They tried to push him into the gray life of a model socialist. And in doing so, they gave him a reason to risk everything. This is not the story of a secret agent with a gadget-filled briefcase. It is the story of a circus artist armed with nothing more than his body, his training, and one very important piece of technology that the East Germans had not thought about the way he did: a high-voltage cable. You are going to follow him as he turns that cable into a weapon against the wall itself. Along the way, you will see why in the Cold War, the real power of the West was not just in missiles and tanks, but in something much harder to quantify: the way people looked at the same piece of equipment and saw not just what it was, but what it could be. It is 1962. The Berlin Wall has been up for just over a year. The first wave of shock has faded. The barbed wire has hardened into concrete. Observation towers have gone up, floodlights have been installed, machine gun nests and patrols are part of the nightly rhythm. In East Berlin, life has settled into a controlled routine. Travel is restricted. Television from the West flickers in some apartments, but officially, the wall is presented as an anti-fascist protective barrier. The message is clear: this is permanent. You are not supposed to leave. For performers like Horst Klein, the new normal is suffocating. He has spent his career flying. Now he's told to stay put. He pushes back politically, speaks too openly, refuses to fit the mold. Officials retaliate by banning him from performing, cutting him off from his audience and his income. In another country, that might be the end of the story. In the divided Germany of the early 1960s, it becomes the beginning. Klein decides that if he cannot live as a free performer in the East, he will try to live as one in the West. But the normal escape routes are closing fast. The sewers are being sealed. The windows along Bernauer Strasse have been bricked up. Tunnels are possible, but they require teams, money, time, things he does not have. What he does have is a lifetime on the trapeze and a very particular way of looking at height. Where other people see danger, he sees possibilities. Walking the streets of East Berlin, eyeing the wall, the death strip, the watchtowers, he notices something that most people ignore. Near the border, running parallel to the wall at one point and then crossing above it, is a power line carried by tall poles, the cable stretching from one side of the death zone to the other. He pays attention. How high is it? What angle does it span? What kind of equipment is attached to the pole? Is this a live power line, or is it a decommissioned insulated cable that happens to run over the border? At some point, he confirms what he needs to know. The line he's looking at is not going to electrocute him. It's dead, or at least not carrying lethal current. To the East German electrical engineers, it's just an old line. To the border designers, it's just something you hang signs on. To Klein, it's a horizontal trapeze suspended over the one place he is never supposed to cross. The plan that takes shape in his mind sounds insane to anyone who hasn't spent their life on a high wire. He will climb one of the poles, grab onto the cable, and move hand over hand across the death strip. No car, no forged passport, no tunnel. Just a man on a wire above land where a misstep is supposed to mean death. He waits for the right moment. Darkness. A lull in patrol patterns. Bad weather can help. Guards are human, and rain or cold pulls focus inward. On the chosen night in December 1962, he moves towards the pole, staying in the shadows. We can imagine the sounds, the distant rumble of vehicles, the crunch of boots on gravel, the hum of transformers, the hiss of wind through the wire. He reaches the base of the pole. It's tall, roughly 18 meters, about 60 feet. Most people wouldn't even think about climbing it. Klein scales it the way he's climbed riggings all his life, hands sure, feet finding holds, eyes scanning the horizon for any flash of a flashlight or movement from a watchtower. At the top, with the city beneath him and the wall off to one side, he reaches out and grabs the cable. From up here, the death strip looks almost abstract, a strip of raked sand, anti-vehicle obstacles, maybe mines, and on the far side, more patrols, more floodlights. The trick now is simple in concept and brutal in practice. He wraps his hands around the cable and begins to move, hand over hand, out over nothing. For the first few meters, his training carries him. This is what he knows. His muscles remember. He has spent years trusting his grip and his sense of balance. But there is a difference between a circus rig and a border cable. The air is freezing. Metal is unforgiving in the cold. His fingers begin to go numb faster than they would under a tent. Every movement sends vibrations through the wire, tiny shudders that might, in the worst case, alert someone watching from a tower. He forces himself to keep going, hand over hand, breath controlled, eyes never looking straight down. There is a dark joke here that only a cynical Cold War audience might appreciate. The East German state spent enormous amounts of money on fences, walls, trenches, tank traps, communication systems, and guard rotations. They published diagrams of their border to prove it was impenetrable. Yet here is one man, bypassing all of it, not with a secret American gadget, but with the exact same physical skills that used to entertain crowds under a circus spotlight. Halfway across, the real enemy of anyone on a wire shows up: fatigue. His arms start to burn. Then they start to shake. The cold bites deeper. His grip is harder to feel. The physics are unforgiving. His entire body weight is hanging from a few square centimeters of skin and muscle. He realizes he cannot continue hand over hand much longer. If he keeps doing it this way, he will simply fall. But quitting is not an option. Below him is the death strip. Behind him is the regime that took away his livelihood. In front of him, somewhere in the dark, is West Berlin. So he does something almost no one else could. He changes techniques while dangling above the wall. Drawing on everything he has trained his body to do, he hauls himself up until he can drape his torso over the wire. Now, instead of hanging from his hands, he is lying on top of the cable, arms and legs wrapped around it like a human sloth. It is an excruciating position, but it spreads the load. His arms get just enough relief to keep working. In the cold night, high above the no man's land, he inches forward, centimeter by centimeter. The rough surface of the cable bites into his clothing and skin. Every muscle trembles. Up in the watchtowers, guards scan the ground, not the sky. They're expecting shadows at the fence, not silhouettes against the stars. Their doctrine is built around the idea that people will try to go through the system, not above it. Down on the ground, the designers of the wall have done their calculations. They know the effective range of their weapons. They know the height and spacing of their fences. They know the typical tactics of escape attempts. What they have not factored in is a professional acrobat turning their own cable into a highway. This is one of those small but telling differences between a top-down system and a freer one. The East German state allocates resources based on what it imagines possible. Klein knows from experience that the human body can do more than that if you are desperate enough and trained enough. Eventually, his arms begin to fail completely. Muscles can only endure so much. He feels strength leaking out of his shoulders, his fingers slipping towards uselessness. He is still not over solid West Berlin ground, but he is close. Every move now is a bet. Can he make it just a little further before gravity calls in the debt? He does not make it all the way. Somewhere near the end of the span, over the western side, he loses his grip. His body peels off the cable. For a moment, he is weightless. Then he is falling. The impact is catastrophic by normal standards. He hits the ground and breaks both arms. Pain explodes through his body. Shock sets in. But as the world narrows to that pain, one fact cuts through. He is on the western side. He has fallen into West Berlin, not back into the East German patrol zone. He is broken. He is bleeding, but he is free. Later, West German rescuers and officials will record the bare facts. December 1962, a trapeze artist from the East climbs a power pole, crosses a de-energized wire above the wall, falls into the West, arms broken, but alive. Journalists and historians will fold his story into lists of craziest Berlin Wall escapes, alongside hot air balloons, improvised zip lines, tunnels, converted cars, and other feats. For Americans watching that list decades later, one reaction comes naturally: fascination. This is not a story of supercomputers or satellites. It is a story of a single human being using the same principles of balance and load distribution that underpin high-rise construction, bridge design, and aerospace engineering, fields where the United States was and remains a world leader. In a way, Klein's escape is a brutally simple analog demonstration of a much larger point. If you understand the physical world deeply enough, you can bend even the most intimidating structures to your will. The East German regime poured resources into weapons and walls. The West poured resources into understanding, into physics, into engineering, into training people to think in terms of possibilities, not just constraints. Horst Klein did not have access to CIA gadgets, but he was a product of a broader European culture of performance and risk that, in the free world, intersected with American circus circuits, film, and television. He belonged to a class of people who saw technology not just as something you obey, but as something you play with. Put differently, the same mindset that could turn a Cadillac dashboard into an escape compartment or a tunnel into a clandestine listening post could also turn a dead power line above the wall into an escape route. From the Soviet side, this is infuriating. They built what they believed was a rational, comprehensive border system. They modeled threats based on conventional military logic. They expected enemy tanks, agents with forged documents, maybe climbers with ladders. What they got, in this case, was a circus artist on a wire. It is not an accident that stories like Klein's often show up in Western media as fearless escapes or craziest escapes from the Berlin Wall. They resonate because they fit a familiar narrative, the individual facing down a rigid system with nothing but skill and nerve. For an American audience, that narrative echoes older stories from World War II. Paratroopers landing behind enemy lines, bomber crews improvising repairs mid-air, GIs hot-wiring enemy equipment. The theater is different, the stakes are more psychological than territorial, but the core emotion is the same: admiration for the person who refuses to accept that the field is closed just because someone in a uniform says it is. In the East, the official reaction to escapes like this was rage and denial. Propaganda focused on the dangers, on the irresponsibility of those who attempted to flee, on the supposed decadence of the West that awaited them. Internal reports, though, told a different story. Lists of methods, diagrams of new escape attempts, constant adjustments to countermeasures. Each strange method, balloon, tunnel, car, cable, forced the border apparatus to evolve. Each successful escape was a data point showing that human ingenuity could not be fully predicted by committee. Zoom out, and Klein's Wire Act becomes part of a larger picture. On one axis, you have the hardware of the Cold War: tanks, missiles, radar sites, communications lines. On the other, you have the software, the mindsets of the people interacting with that hardware. The Soviet bloc excelled at building heavy hardware and enforcing rigid rules about how it should be used. The West excelled at encouraging people to think sideways, about turning radar sites into tunnel covers, television cameras into clandestine tunnel funders, passenger cars into escape machines, and yes, power cables into horizontal ladders. Klein's story is not about American technology in the narrow sense. It is about the broader ecosystem of Western thinking that Americans were and are a central part of. A world in which the question, "What else can this thing do?" is always lurking in the back of someone's mind. When you watch this from the United States, it is easy to feel that familiar surge of pride and curiosity. Pride that in the Cold War, the side you aligned with was the one that inspired people to take these risks, to improvise, to trust that if they could just get to the other side of that line, they would land in a system that valued their individuality. Curiosity about how many other stories like this are still hidden in archives and personal memories. There is also a sobering edge. For every Horst Klein who made it, there were others who failed, who were shot, arrested, or maimed and dragged back across the border. Walls do not fall because one man hangs from a cable. They fall because over time, enough people demonstrate that no wall can fully contain a population that wants out. The power of Klein's escape lies in the way it compresses that truth into a single, unforgettable image. A man hanging from a cable above a system built to prevent exactly that kind of movement. Muscles failing, gravity winning, and yet, in the end, the system losing because he falls on the wrong side of the line. It's a moment where all the abstractions of the Cold War, ideology, propaganda, strategic balance, are boiled down to a brutally simple equation: body versus border. The border loses. For Soviet and East German officials reading the reports afterwards, this was one more headache in a ledger full of headaches. For Western audiences, then and now, it's something else. A reminder that in the contest between rigid control and creative risk, the advantage often belongs to the side that produces people who think like engineers and acrobats, not just like gatekeepers. In that sense, Horst Klein's Night on the Wire belongs in the same psychological category as the American-backed spy tunnels, the modified cars, the NBC-funded escape routes. All of them are stories about turning the physical world into an ally against a political system that believed it could dictate reality from above. They are stories that, when told well, produce exactly the reaction you are aiming for in your viewers. Pride that free societies cultivate people who try, fascination at the sheer audacity of the methods, curiosity about what other cables, tunnels, and machines could tell us if we looked at them the way a trapeze artist does a wire. Would you like a second connected script that focuses on a series of other impossible Berlin Wall escapes, cars, balloons, zip lines, using the same emotional tone, so you can build a whole mini-series around individual ingenuity versus the system?